Hi, it's Matrixity. Welcome to my Matrix. How have you been? It's been a minute since I did a Spooky Friday, but today we're doing a Spooky Friday. And today we are talking about some little kids that I honestly don't want to talk about because apparently the more you know about them, somehow they know that you know about them, and it makes you more likely to encounter them, which is something I don't want. So today we're going to be talking about the black-eyed kids. The black-eyed kids. Have you heard about them? Well, this was actually a request from one of my friends on Facebook, but I've heard about them long before she made the request, and I kind of was spooked by them. So I just kind of avoided them because Lord knows I don't want to encounter a black-eyed child. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about them. First of all, let's kind of start with this scenario. You're at the gas station, minding your own business, putting gas in your car, and you might be about ready to pull off. You just got in your car and you hear a tap, tap, tap on your window. And you look over and it's a child, a little boy or a little girl, or maybe a little boy and a little girl. And their clothing looks a little bit outdated, but they're asking you for help. They're knocking on your window frantically because they want to get in your car. And they're saying, can you please help us? Our parents, we've lost our parents and we need to get home. We live just down the road. Can you drop us off? And you look at them and you think, I should help these kids because, in today's world, there are predators out there who are looking for kids. So you look at them, but you have this feeling that something isn't quite right. And then you really look really hard at them and you realize their eyes are solid black. Black, shiny orbs. No whites, no irises, just black, all black. And suddenly you're overcome with a hint of dread. So you roll up your window and you take off. You have just met the black-eyed kids. The other thing that they may do to encounter you is come to your home. Not only will they encounter you in places in public, but you might hear a knock at your door, at your house. And there on the porch is a child asking to be let in because their parents are going to be home soon, but they want to come in and wait for their parents, or the parents are going to pick them up from your home. So again, you think you're going to be the helpful neighbor. This could be a neighborhood child, and help them, let them in your home. Don't do it. Be sure you look at any child who comes to your door and knocks, because that could be a blackout child. And first of all, their eyes won't appear black in the very beginning, but when you encounter them and talk with them, they eventually change. And their eyes become those solid black scary orbs, and you'll be filled with a sense of dread. So those are the black-eyed kids. I myself have never encountered them, but I've encountered something, I don't know, kind of similar, but that's for a different story. Today, it's all about the black-eyed kids. So let's talk a little bit about the history of the black-eyed kids. I'll tell you about them. And I'm also going to find you a picture so you can see what they look like. So here is the picture that I found of the black-eyed kids. Now, the black-eyed kids have been around since the 1980s. They've been talked about since then. So they're not something new. They're not a new phenomenon. And what they are, there's several theories, and nobody is consistent as far as what they are. One theory says that they're actually aliens and that they're trying to reach out to Earth people to make a connection with them, and they have taken on a human form to be more, acceptable to us, but something still is very strange about them. The other thing, as far as what they could possibly be, you actually hear from people who are demonologists. They say that the black-eyed kids are actually children of Satan. And they're here, of course, evil walks the earth, and so do they. And they are here trying to get into your homes so that they can actually enter your life. So that if you let them in, because apparently they can't enter your car, they can't enter your home unless you give them permission. And once you give them permission, you know what? Doesn't that sound like vampires? They can't come in without permission? Well, once you give evil permission to come in to your home and your life, then they're there and bad things will start to happen. So nobody knows quite what they are, but those are the two theories. And the fact that they've been around since the 1980s, I mean, my goodness, that's a long time. Well, some of the first stories are from way back then, the 80s and the 90s. And probably one of the most popular was reported by, he was not a publicist, but he was a reporter out of Texas. And he said he had an encounter. He said he was in a mall parking lot near a theater. He was writing out a check in his car and he wasn't paying attention. Next thing you know, he hears a tap, tap, tap on his driver's side window. And so he looks over, and of course, it's a child. The child's not looking directly at him. His face is kind of down, but he rolls down his window, and it's him and another little boy. And the little boy says, you know, we want to go see the movies, but we had left our money at home. Can you help us? Can you take us home? It's just not too far from here. And you can bring us right back and we can go to the movies. Well, when he rolled down the window, the reporter, and his name again was Brian Bethel, he felt a horrible sense of dread. And still, he hadn't seen the boys' eyes because their heads were still down. And they weren't looking at him in the eye either. So when he did look them in the eye, their eyes were normal initially. And so the boys continued to talk with them, and he continued to look at them in their eyes. And the boys would say things to try to reassure him that it was okay to take them down the road to go get their money for the movie. They said things like, oh, it's not far. You know, we just want to go down the road and get our money and come back. And you know what? We're just kids. We're not going to hurt you. That is not reassuring. The next thing those two little boys said were, and we don't have a gun. And I'm like, really? If two children today said to me, let us in, and we don't have a gun, I'm not letting them in, because that is not a reassuring statement. So when he looked away, Brian Bethel looked away from the kids for a second. When he looked back, their eyes were solid black. And he knew that something was horribly wrong. So he rolled up his window and he sped away. But that was his encounter with the black-eyed kids. And he continues to say that that really happened. Now, the next big story of an encounter with a black-eyed kid probably happened in the early 90s. And this was with a couple who lived in Maine. And they were at home. This is an elderly couple, and everything I said, we read about them, I couldn't find their names. They were at home. It was a snowy evening in Maine, and so they heard a knock on the door. So they went to the front door, and there were two little boys, and they wanted to come in because they were waiting for their parents, and they said their parents would be home soon, but they would be coming to their house to pick them up. So the wife called to the husband came to the door, and again, the little boys repeated their story that they, you know, just lived a little ways down the road. They were locked out. They were waiting on their parents to come pick them up, and could they come into the house? Well, something felt horribly wrong about the boys asking to come in, but they thought, well, it's snowing outside. These apparently are neighborhood kids, not too far down the road from them. We'll let them in. So they did. So they let them into the house. And the elderly couple had a cat. Well, the cat immediately went crazy. The cat began to hiss and began to kind of like yowl, became very angry, and nobody knew what was happening. But it was all directed toward the boys. The cat went to another room and was staring at the boys and yowling and hissing and carrying on like crazy. And so the boys needed to go to the bathroom. So one went to the bathroom, you know, the other one was sitting talking with the parents, with the elderly couple. And they still wouldn't really look him in the eye. And then all of a sudden, they looked really hard at those kids, and they saw their eyes change. They went from what was a normal eye color to solid black. The black orbs came out. No pupil, no irises, no color, just solid black orbs. They began to get really scared. The couple did. So then the other little boy came out of the bathroom, and they announced, our parents are here. And so the man of the couple put his hand to his nose because suddenly he had a horrible nosebleed, and all the lights in the house went out. The electricity went out, and the house was as black as the boy's orbless eyes, horribly black. So the woman screamed, the lights flickered back on, and then the front door opened, and the little boy ran out. The first little boy did, and said, our father is here. So then both boys ran out, and the elderly couple got up and went to the door and saw these two very unusually tall men at the end of the driveway. They didn't come to the house. They were at the end of the driveway. They were very unusually tall. Now, when I think of that, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Slender Man, but I don't think they were. But they were unusually tall. The little boys ran to them and they went off in a car and they were gone. Well, the elderly couple, for the rest of the week, the man continued to have nosebleeds on and off, and the electricity flickered many times throughout the whole week. And then things settled down after that. So, you know, those black-eyed kids went into their house and things were changed. So again, the black-eyed kids can encounter you at your home. So be careful when you see little kids knocking at your door. And you know what? It is always the little kids. There's always something wrong with little kids. But there's a little bit more about the black-eyed kids. So be back with that in just a minute. Now, the black-eyed kids are not just over here in America. They're also over in Europe. So they're everywhere. So they have been seen in the UK ever since the 80s. So again, the 80s are when they were seen here. The 80s are when they were seen there. And they were over in, let me get the area right, in a place called Cannock Chase in Staffordshire, England. So they were first encountered there by a woman who was out on a walk with her daughter. And she heard her scream, and it was a young girl scream. So she and the daughter began to look around, thinking that a little girl needed help. And sure enough, they saw a little girl. When they kind of like turned around, there happened to be a little girl all in a long white dress. It was a very unusual white dress, standing behind them. But the little girl had her hands over her eyes. So initially, they couldn't see her eyes. And so the woman asked her, "Are you okay?" And at that point, the little girl put her hands down, and of course her eyes were black orbs, no irises, no pupils, no nothing. She grabbed her daughter and took off running. Well, this same little girl has been seen in that same area throughout the years. There was another encounter with her where a man saw her off in the distance. And she again had on the long white dress, and when they walked to her and they asked if she was okay again, he noticed her eyes were black, and they left either. They left also. So she kind of like appears and disappears over in England. There was also an encounter where someone over in England also saw 5 children off in the distance, all had on long white outfits, long dresses, and they kind of mysteriously disappeared too when they got close, but he could see that their eyes were black also. And then back here in 2009, in the States, there was a Marine at Camp Lejeune. He had an encounter. One night he was at home watching movies, and he heard a knock on the door. So he thought it was his roommate who had left his keys. And so without even thinking, he got up and opened the door and didn't really look, just opened the door and just sat back down. And then he heard someone say hello. He looked around, and there were 2 little kids about to enter his home, but actually they were stopped. They were right there at the door sill. But he looked at them, and he felt something horribly wrong, and so he jumped up and shut the door quickly. And just before he shut the door, he saw their eyes were all black. So he was kind of terrified. And the next day he asked around to see whether or not anyone had heard about kids wandering around the base, and no one, of course, has seen any kids wandering around the base. So there you go. They're here. People are encountering them. They've been around since the 80s. And actually, people have written books about the black-eyed kids. There are even movies about the black-eyed kids. So they are a very unusual phenomenon, not something I want to encounter. And after hearing their story, I don't know if you want to encounter it either. It might not be a good thing. But anyway, that is it for today's Spooky Friday. And see you later, alligator. Bye!